Georgia right now, I've got the current mood for the fan base as sorry, not sorry, which may be confusing because you're thinking, well, shouldn't the mood just be jubilation? Shouldn't they just be turning cartwheels? They've won back-to-back national championships, and they are doing that. They absolutely are. You cannot go very many places in that state. You can't get off an exit off 75 or 85 or even 185 down near Columbus without seeing those flags all over the place. Not that they weren't already there before, but they are especially prominently featured now. So the state is totally drunk on these past 2 seasons. Having said that, sorry, not sorry. What could I mean by that? What do you think I mean by that? Georgia fans, it's your mood. How do you feel right now? About your program, you feel ecstatic. What do you feel about the world around your program? Some of you know where I'm going with this. There's this really interesting dynamic right now that exists around Georgia athletics, Georgia football. But before I talk about that, I want to take you back to last year. This time last year, Georgia was coming off a national championship, much as they are right now. And a couple of things happened that I think benefited Kirby Smart. One is they lost a ton of talent. And the benefit there was his team was so new. His starters were so green in terms of success. I don't think they ever felt like they had accomplished anything. I don't think that they ever allowed complacency to set in because the lineup looked so new. But there was another thing that was happening. And the other thing was there was 10 kinds of chaos happening off the field. Not at Georgia, in college football. There was all kinds of stuff happening with playoff expansion and realignment. And not to mention, you had coaches on the move. The Brian Harsin saga, remember that? There was a bunch of stuff that was happening that distracted everyone and took everyone's attention. And so even on this show, we spent probably the least amount of time talking about a national champion as we ever have. Georgia folks think it was because I wanted to neglect them, which makes about less sense than anything I've ever heard accused against us. But the reason was the same reason a bunch of other folks didn't talk about them. There was too much other stuff to talk about. Now, Kirby Smart took that, harnessed it, and realized if I don't have a bunch of folks heaping praise on my guys, and the guys I'm going to war with this fall in a lot of cases are new, we can avoid a lot of the complacency issues that normally set in. And they did. You couldn't spot a nickel's difference between the desperation and hunger this year's team played with and last year's team played with. That is rare, rare stuff. So now we're coming off a second national championship in as many years. And lo and behold, there have been some things that have happened off the field that involve Jalen Carter that have caught a lot of attention nationally. I'm totally separating the incident that happened with Jalen Carter's involvement in the incident and the way that's been discussed. So understand that from the outset. The way particularly that some local media outlets in the state, the AJC is what I'm talking about, the way the AJC, which is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, has covered Georgia athletics over the past 2 months has been borderline weird to me in how out of touch it's been. I'm all for holding the powerful accountable. All for it. There is absolutely a role in hard-nosed journalism in politics, in athletics, if it's done the right way. I don't particularly think the AJC's gone about it the right way. I said on Twitter the other day, the AJC covers Georgia football like they're running against each other in an election. It is the wildest thing. They're the most whacked out opinion columns that have been put out by that outlet in regards to Georgia and Kirby Smart and how he runs his program in the last month or so that I've ever seen. So you may make many accusations against Georgia, but one you'll never make is, boy, they really get babied by the media down there, don't they? It's the weirdest thing. And so he's spent this spring, Kirby Smart has spent this spring fighting back accusations of culture issues, and they don't have their act together over there, and they're losing control of the program. He's the one who is the front-facing member of the organization that walks to the microphone. You don't think those players don't hear that? You don't think that isn't taken personal in that locker room? You don't think that fan base doesn't take that personal. Now, there is a response here. I'll go ahead and make it for you since there's no one in the room. Josh, that pales in comparison to a situation where two people lost their lives. It sure does. It sure does. So that's why, again, I'm going to say I'm totally separating what happens now moving forward and what happens in relation to Georgia football's role and Kirby Smart's role in that versus that itself, versus how serious and dire the consequences were with what happened itself. Because the fact is, terrible things happen sometimes. Isolated, terrible incidents can happen. I told you the other day when this whole culture issue nonsense was being disseminated by certain media outlets towards Georgia football. Well, they got a culture issue. No, they don't. They got some kids that have done some stupid stuff. And I said then, and I'll say again, the way you can spot the ones with culture issues is programs with culture issues don't have good years. Programs with good culture sometimes have bad weeks. They have bad days. But the ones with bad culture, it's impossible for them to grow something that is long-term and sustainably good. Georgia has done those things. They continue to do those things. They're not going anywhere. And so I've dismissed that, but the fan base hasn't. And so Kirby Smart has, again, gotten someone to fuel his program. It turns out that that entity was right down the road in Atlanta, Georgia. He has gotten someone to fuel his program. He has gotten someone to convince players inside those walls that the entire world is against them. And it would shock me if they didn't play with the same fire this fall that they always have. And all the while, that fan base looks around and they listen to folks say, you know, if Jamison Williams would have been healthy in 2021, you guys wouldn't have won that title. Well, if Ohio State makes a field goal, you don't even play for the title last year. And they look at them and they say exactly what they should say, which is, sorry, not sorry. I'm sorry, I am not sorry. It's Vince Vaughn wedding crashers level stuff. Sorry, I'm not sorry. I don't want you to say what he said next. But Georgia football, top of the sport right now. Don't be apologizing. If you're a fan, don't be apologizing for anything.